1 minute as soon as I get a cue. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the community room in the Tempe History Museum for part 2 of our Friday the 13th Friday night special featuring the 2 candidates seeking the office of mayor in Tempe. This election marks a noteworthy milestone in our political history. Stability in the office of mayor has been a hallmark for the community. This is the first time in 8 years that 2 candidates are competing for the city's highest office. Tonight's forum is designed to help sort out their political and philosophical differences and give you a better understanding of what each candidate represents. The forum is co-sponsored in the public interest and as a community service by the Tempe Chamber of Commerce and the Arizona Republic. For full transparency, the sponsors wish to note that the Tempe Chamber of Commerce does endorse candidates, but I remind you that for tonight's program, the 2 organizations have partnered for the simple purpose of providing an opportunity for you to make your own determination by getting to see and hear the candidates in a neutral and unbiased setting. Hopefully by the conclusion of the evening, you'll come away with a greater knowledge of the candidates and their positions, thereby allowing for a more informed decision when you cast your ballot. My name is Vic Linoff, and I'll serve as moderator for tonight's forum. And I want to thank our candidates for appearing here and their willingness to face off against each other and to take your questions. Mark Mitchell on your left and Corey Woods on your right. Every effort has been made to assure that tonight's dialogue will be impartial, balanced, and provide each candidate an equal opportunity for expression of views. We've achieved this in the following way. Just before we started, the candidate seating position was determined by a random drawing. After brief timed introductions, the sponsors will start off by posing a situational issue or question for each candidate to address or resolve. Because it's just a 2-candidate field and the need for clearly understanding their positions, we are not imposing any time limits on the responses. However, even though the Q&As will not be timed, in order to provide a more engaging evening, we encourage the candidates to keep their comments as brief as possible. But at the moderator's discretion, in order to keep things moving, a candidate may be asked to conclude his remarks. This will ensure the greatest number of questions, audience participation, and an opportunity for a lively discussion. Each round of responses will be in random order so that, well, 2 candidates, it's hard to do it real randomly, but we'll do our best. Our sponsor panelists are Paulina Pineda from the Arizona Republic and Jihan Cottrell, who is chair of the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. At any time, the sponsors may interject to request clarification of a response or ask a follow-up question. After the initial sponsor queries and as time permits, we will be taking questions directly from the audience. Before we get to the Q&As, let's begin with some visioning. Tempe has been undergoing a dramatic transformation in the last couple of years. And so we will ask the candidates to share with our audience in 60 seconds or less, the only time part, your vision for Tempe's future and how your leadership will help move this city forward. And we'll begin with Mr. Mitchell.
Well, thank you, Vic, and I want to thank the Arizona Republic and the Tempe Chamber of Commerce and Gil and your staff for hosting us here this evening. And it truly is an honor to be the mayor of Tempe, my hometown, a city of which I grew up in. All of my education has been in Tempe, from elementary school to middle school to high school to graduating from Arizona State. All of my schools started with an M, Meyer, McCamey, McClintock, except for Arizona State. And you know, I had the best childhood growing up in Tempe. The quality of life as when I was a kid is so important, and I want when I first ran for office, I wanted my two daughters to experience what I did, but that much better. And I'm proud of the progress we've made in our community. I'm proud of the equal pay ordinance that we passed. I'm proud of the anti-discrimination ordinance that we passed. And more importantly, I'm very proud of the economic vitality that this community has seen that's going to continue to give the quality of life amenities for future generations. And I asked for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Woods. We have to kill the mics.
First of all, I also wanted to thank the Arizona Republican, the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, as well as Mr. Linoff for moderating, and for everyone for being here tonight, and those folks watching at home. My name is Corey Woods. I served on the City Council between 2008 and 2016. I've also been a near 17-year resident of this city. And I can tell you, when I first came here, it was to go to Arizona State University. I was going to pursue a master's degree, and then I was going to go on for a doctorate. But I will tell you, I fell in love with this city. And I am more in love with this city today than I was when I first set foot off that plane and came into Tempe, Arizona. At the same time, Tempe is a city of choice. It's the kind of place that I chose to live. My father lives sort of right down the street, right in neighboring Ahwatukee, and apparently I'm not that good of a politician if I couldn't get my dad to live in the city, apparently. But I can tell you that from my perspective, it's very important to focus on what we can do to move our city forward. We're a great city, but at the same time, we've got some challenges coming up with traffic, housing affordability, homelessness, bulk trash pickup, and a whole host of other issues. While we are a great city, it's important that we do come up with proactive solutions to address those challenges, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And just a technical note, we found out why we're getting the feedback, and that's because we have a mic downstage for the audience questions, and sound bounces off, and it causes the feedback, which means for the candidates, we can only have one mic open at a time. So I'm told. All right. Let us begin with our sponsor questions, and with the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, Gian Cottrell.
Thank you, Vic, and thank you both for being here. We're going to start it off with the economy. Economic development is consistently cited by voters and businesses as one of their top local issues. What are your top two economic developmental goals if elected?
And to initiate this round, let's go with Mr. Woods.
Thank you. So a couple of big things from my perspective. One, it's developing an initiative to do workforce training and development for every person living in the city of Tempe. We all know that the economy is rapidly changing, and some jobs that are here today are going to be gone tomorrow, but I think it's very important that we actually train our workforce and grow our own people so that we can fill the jobs that are currently here within this city. And I think it needs to be open to everyone in this community, regardless of age, income, demographic. We really should heavily focus on that. And the second thing I think is sort of having a true sort of local first initiative when it comes to partnering with local small businesses and helping startups. Most of the jobs in this community that are created are from local small businesses. We also know that people who are local and that they actually live here, they are more invested in the community, and frankly, they're much more likely to build and support things that we actually support here in Tempe. They support our local nonprofits, and they're likely going to build things that are different than a lot of these multinational conglomerates that want to build 25 and 30-story skyscrapers. They're going to build stuff that's going to serve the actual needs of the community, and they'll build it within the scale that Tempe residents have come to know and love, therefore not destroying the quality of life in our neighborhoods, but actually enhancing it. So from my perspective, those are the two things. I've got a lot more, but I will stop at two since you said two.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. This is something, and I really do appreciate this question because this really is the lifeblood of our community. In order for us to have the resources, we have to have good, positive, sustainable growth and economic development. And since my time as mayor, since I've been elected in office since 2012, we've added over 33,000 jobs. We've had over $3 billion in private capital investment. And it doesn't stop there. We're going to continue to grow and evolve. I'm proud of the fact that I have worked for over 20, most of my adult life, for small businesses, from Tempe Paint Decorator Center to Clayton Floor Clearing and Interiors, which is a family-run business. And I understand the lifeblood of small businesses, what they mean to the community, and having that complement the large companies that do come here. We're very fortunate that we created a successful city where people want to come and live and work, and we're very fortunate that companies want to be here. The top 10 financial institutions in the world, 5 have presence here in Tempe, and it's not by accident. It's because of the investments that we've made in our community, in our neighborhoods, and knowing that when businesses come here, that they're part of a community. Not only do they just work here, but we want them to be involved and engaged in the civic organizations throughout our community that really defines Tempe to make the city what it is today. And it's a combination of residents, businesses, small businesses, really affecting the outcome of the quality of life that our residents expect and what you all deserve, and it's important that we continue to grow the economy. I'm excited about the 1 million+ square feet that we have at the Innovation, Discovery, and Education Campus. This is just west of the Art Center, and also the maker districts and the improvement districts that we're working on. It is so important that we continue to be innovative and evolve.
Thank you. And let's go to our co-sponsor, the Arizona Republic, and Paulina Pineda.
Thank you, Vic, and thank you to the candidates. The city has regularly used tax breaks to attract development. Considering Tempe's success, are such incentives necessary? Why would or wouldn't you support a tax break for a development?
And let's start this round with Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. And this is a really good question because economic development, it's a case-by-case basis. It depends. Some projects are looking for an opportunity for some assistance so they can get a better project, which we could get and result a better project for our community. So it really is on a case-by-case basis. And I think it's important that we have certain types of tools because oftentimes we get told what we can and can't do by our legislature. And it's important that we have the flexibility when an issue does arise and if there is a public benefit that we have the ability to offer some type of an incentive. And it really benefits our community in the long run, especially our school districts, because you get a better quality project, and when the tax incentives expire, you get that much more value in the land that really does affect our school district, which is why we see such success in our school district with the types of projects that we do have in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Woods.
So I believe the tax break should be used very sparingly. So I think the elephant in the room is the whole thing called the GPLET, the Government Property Lease Excise Tax, which is pretty much one of the only tools that cities still have left to generate economic development. The problem is that tool was never intended to be used the way that it's currently being used. And from my perspective, it's being overused. My whole thing when I was on council, and one of the benefits of stepping away for a period of time is that I voted for a number of those GPLET projects during my tenure. But stepping away provides you with a certain kind of perspective and the ability to reflect on what you did during that time and recognizing, yes, you might be maybe in 9 years when the property comes back on the rolls, everything's going to be fine potentially. But the problem is you've got school districts that need money right now to educate their students, to pay their teachers, to do things like band uniforms and things of that nature. And so I don't think an 8-year tax abatement is something to be taken lightly because our school districts really do suffer when we continue to take taxable property off of the rolls. So my perspective is we need to find a better economic development tool. We are the only state in the country that doesn't have something called tax increment financing, which is actually a proven economic development tool. We should work with other cities and towns and spend time lobbying the governor, the state legislature, to frankly get rid of this GPLET tool in favor of something that's not going to rob school districts of necessary revenue. And my perspective on tax incentives in general is if you actually my thought process, if you actually are getting something really in return, affordable housing, workforce development program, something of that nature, I think, or maybe a supermarket in an area that's a food desert, then it might be actually worth giving that tax abatement. But the reality is if they're not providing something that's really going to enhance the quality of life for our surrounding neighborhoods, my answer is a no.
Thank you. And you wanted to respond, Mr. Mitchell?
Yes. One of the interesting parts of, and it's very, it's an opportunity, as I mentioned, it's a case-by-case basis, and we do hold our schools harmless when it comes to whatever incentives or abatement that we do offer. And you only do it if there is a public benefit. And also, whatever breaks it, ever since I've been on the council, and especially as mayor, the only thing that we've ever happened, any project has been performance-based, which means nothing comes out of the taxpayers, out of our budget. It's all revenues generated out of the project that go back in to help sustain that project for the betterment of our community and to really provide the resources for the quality of life that you all expect.
Thank you.
So my argument to that, though, however, would be, I've spent a lot of time with local school board members in all 3 school districts, Tempe Elementary, Tempe Union, and Kyrene, and all of them simply do not like this tax abatement being used. because their concern is they really do have needs right now. Their students are high needs, they've got teachers who have needs, and they've got other needs in the school. And so they have repeatedly come to me, and I believe other members of the city council, and said, we really need to phase this out in favor of something that was actually intended to be used for this purpose. So while I understand the whole notion of trying to use a tool to spur certain kinds of economic development, I think the most important thing is that we listen to our residents and listen to our local school districts who are educating the next generation of kids in this city.
Thank you. Let us go back to our sponsors, and this time from Paulina.
Thank you, Vic. The city has at times found itself at odds with lawmakers with a challenge to its dark money ordinance and some of the property tax breaks it's given out, and hamstrung to some extent on implementing affordable housing strategies. Is there anything that can be done to smooth that relationship to help move important city challenges forward? How would you go about developing a working relationship?
And let's start this round with Mr. Woods.
Thank you. I think it's just a notion of providing services to people, but it's also just developing and maintaining relationships. And relationships take time to develop and to nurture. And so you have to spend repeated time, whether it's in the governor's office or the state legislators who represent Tempe, to develop the kinds of relationships necessary to move forward meaningful public policy. And I mean, it's one of the, you can't just simply have one meeting and shake hands and tell people that this is something you want done or hand them the city's legislative agenda. It really is something where you have to be on the phone with these people probably every week or at least every other week, kind of constantly reminding them about the things that your residents need to live a successful life in Tempe. And those are the kinds of relationships that I developed during my 8 years on council. I was known for being a leader and a consensus builder, and those are the kinds of relationship building skills that I would bring to the job of mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate this question because I often talk to our state lawmakers multiple times a week, especially in legislative session or in upcoming pending legislation that could have a detrimental effect and unintended consequences. So much so that since I've been mayor, I've actually hosted meetings with our state legislators and breakfasts to educate and work with them, ask them what your needs are from us and how we can work together, because our residents and our constituents are their residents and their constituents. We have a shared constituency, and it's so important we have that open line of communication. And as a president of the League of Cities and Towns, which is all 91 cities, which I was a member of and I'm still part of the executive team, we work really hard on establishing relationships with lawmakers and my colleagues from around the valley to really focus on legislation, because local control is the #1 issue for cities because we get preempted more often than not. And it's important that we have those open lines of communication, so how we work with one another and we continue to see things happen. A good example was there was some unintended consequence legislation that I actually worked with a council member with the mayor of Chandler, J-Tip Trainee, and a council member from Phoenix, and we worked with the business development community to help stop certain types of legislation that would have swept over $12 million out of our general fund. And that's something that doesn't happen by accident. It works with teamwork and with leadership, and that's something I'm very proud of.
So my only concern, though, with that is that when we talk about having good relationships currently with state legislators, the problem becomes, if we do, why are we constantly getting preempted on things? If we have the kinds of relationships where we can pick up the phone and have conversations, we should be able to work a lot of those problems out before a preemption bill gets dropped at the state capitol. So I question how strong those relationships are. If this continues to happen, it continues to hinder Tempe. The other thing that I have an issue with, though, is that I many times hear things coming out of the city that talk about we can't address the problem with Airbnbs, we can't address the issues with housing affordability, and many times homelessness because of elements of the state legislature. I think what you elect a mayor and council to do is to not talk about the hurdles and the barricades put up by the state legislature, but someone to think in an innovative fashion and work as hard as they can to come up with creative solutions to really solve the challenges important to Tempe residents. And I'm not the kind of person to tell you that I can't do something because of someone else. I'm going to sit down and roll up my sleeves until I figure it out on your behalf.
And, this is something that I can really relate to, and I do appreciate this part of this discussion because we have rolled up our sleeves. We've worked innovative solutions with, in partnership, our state legislators. At the League conference down in Tucson regarding an issue that we don't have control over. I asked the President of the Senate, President Fan, if they could create a working group regarding short-term rentals, and they did that. And they're having hearings right now that this upcoming session, they're going to help fix some of the unintended consequences when it comes to short-term rentals. And that's from the leadership being involved as a mayor of Tempe, but working with my colleagues and our state legislators from throughout the state, actually, to get this information to come back to say, hey, this is the solutions that we need. We need your help. This is a local control issue, and we're partners in this. And that would not happen if I was not part of that leadership team down with the League of Cities and Towns and as the mayor of Tempe. And I really appreciate that opportunity to solve those solutions.
Okay, on to our next question from the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Cottrell.
Thank you, Vic. As an elected official, you may make decisions that you later wish you could change. Can you give an example of a vote or a decision you've made in the past that you wish you could take back?
And for this round, we'll begin with Mr. Mitchell.
I mean, one of the best part about serving in office is you learn something new every day, and something that you may have not have known at the time, and you look back that you take that experience and the learning experience that you have to help frame decisions for the future. And that's something I'm very proud of over the years, that since I've been mayor especially, the decisions that we made and how we're looking towards the future when it comes to lessons learned. And we also, it's so important to get enough information so that we can make an informed decision. And I'm proud of the fact that we have made some good choices. Tempe is a very successful city. We have a lot of opportunities to improve, and we see that even with our citizen satisfaction survey. Even though it's very high, I know that my experiences in making decisions only help us for future generations, so that, you know, as we continue to move forward, that we could be thoughtful about the process and the decisions that we make to better our community.
Mr. Woods.
So I've got a very direct answer about this. The Tempe Flour Mill project. So about 2-3 months before I left council, there was a vote about sort of redeveloping the Hayden Flour Mill. And I remember meeting with the developer and the zoning attorney on several occasions and telling them I didn't like the project. I just thought the amphitheater and everything they drew up was not going to work. I questioned whether or not they could actually get financing and whether they could pull it off. But at the end of the day, I was leaving, and my thought process was I didn't want to be the fly in the ointment of the guy at the wrong end of the 6-1 vote on my way out the door, and so I ended up voting for the project because I was just trying to not create dissension amongst the council. Fast forward 3.5 years, and not a single piece of dirt has moved on that property. Had I actually voted the way that I wanted to at the time, I would have looked like a genius, but instead, I didn't. But once again, I think that's the benefit of, frankly, stepping away after the 8 years. You do get a chance to thoughtfully reflect on some of those decisions, and you tell yourself, if that kind of situation comes up ever again, I'm going to make sure that I always vote my conscience. I'm not going to be worried about being the fly in the ointment. I will simply politely explain to my colleagues why I can't support something, and I will vote no. But that's something I think you only learn when you have the ability to take a step back and really thoughtfully reflect.
Thank you. All right, let us go to the audience. You up first, sir?
Yes. Mr. Woods and Mayor Mitchell, I would like to point out that both of you were serving on the council when a former city councilwoman declared 34 votes conflicts over a 2-year period because of a romantic relationship with a prominent developer without disclosing the reasons until she was confronted by the press. Citing her public work at the time, Mr. Woods endorsed Ms. Shanna Ellis for re-election anyway, and Mayor Mitchell did not. Could both of you please expound upon the effect on public trust when council members declare conflicts without publicly disclosing the reasons? And Mr. Woods, could you please explain this endorsement now? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Appreciate the question. So yes, back in 2014, I did endorse Ms. Ellis for re-election, and my perspective was because she was one of the hardest working council members I ever worked with. We were very much aligned on issues pertaining to affordable housing and human services, and she was always an ally when it came to those issues. She was one of the people I knew on council who read every single thing in her packet when we came forward for a vote. Matter of fact, she would call me sometimes on a Tuesday and say, have you gotten to this point? And I hadn't gotten that far yet, and I was embarrassed. So I had to play catch up. So my perspective was she was an exceptional council member. When it comes to the conflicts of interest, perhaps in retrospect, she was declaring the conflicts, she was doing everything ethically by not voting on those issues and not participating in executive sessions that pertain to those deals. But at the same time, in retrospect, even she might say, perhaps I should have disclosed what the nature of the arrangement was or what her relationship was. But at the same time, my perspective is I supported her because I frankly think that she was an exceptional council member. She's still a close personal friend, and I stand by the endorsement.
Mr. Mitchell.
If a council member has a conflict, they need to disclose it, and I think majority of us do if there is a conflict. So I think everything has happened ethically.
And let us go, you missed out on the first round, so we'll put you in here for this part of the forum.
I'm going to pick this up. I'm a little tall. So I meant this question originally for the candidates for council, but I'll ask it here as well. So just first of all, briefly, raise your hand if either of you regularly use our public transportation system, whether that's the light rail, the buses, the orbits, paratransit, et cetera. Okay. The reason I ask is specifically because I like to see my council members and my mayor walk the walk when we're talking about things like climate change, sustainability, traffic, et cetera. The things I want to point out here specifically, though, are with regard to climate change. We have 30 years to decarbonize if we want to avoid 2.5 degrees of global warming. And yet, in the last 30 years, the Phoenix metro area has quadrupled its CO2 emissions, and 80% of our CO2 emissions in the Phoenix metro area come from automobiles, which is a dramatically higher fraction than most of the rest of the United States. Additionally, you can't fix the problem just by moving away from gasoline and diesel cars to electric cars or autonomous vehicles, because you still have the emissions embedded in the built-in environments that enables car dependence. Single-family houses consume 2 to 4 times as much energy, electricity, fuel, water, et cetera, per capita as compared to multifamily housing. And even electric and autonomous cars still produce secondary emissions from things like the aerosols and particulates from tires and brake pads. My first advisor at Arizona State University had to leave a year into my program because his daughter had such bad asthma that they physically couldn't remain in Tempe. And I had to switch advisors because of this. This tangibly affects us. So what I want to hear from both of you is, how are you going to make our transit system and our bike infrastructure and our transportation networks overall good enough that you yourselves would use them more? And do you believe we should disincentivize car dependence in Tempe?
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. And I totally support our transit system. I served on Valley Metro Rail. I also was on the working group for the strengthen our municipal carbon neutrality goal by 2050 and also using renewable resources by 2035. And I was also a part of making sure that we hired our first sustainability director in Braden, Dr. Braden Kay. And I can't stress this enough, having grown up here, understanding how cool it used to be, and now we have a lot of heat island effects. That's why we have increased 25% of our tree canopy. I also support the bike infrastructure, a truly multimodal community. I ride bikes all throughout the city of Tempe. I also use our public transportation when it's appropriate, because I do have a job and I have to get to downtown Phoenix, and timing is an issue. But I do utilize it, and I think it's so important. So much so that, we're the 17th most bicycle-friendly city in the country. We've added additional hundreds of miles of bike lanes since I've been in office, and we're going to continue to grow. We're actually expanding on our orbit system into South Tempe, as well as we're under construction of a streetcar that we're moving forward. So, we walk the walk. Tempe has the highest ridership of any city in the valley when it comes to public transportation. And I love the programs that we have when we work with businesses to de-incentivize the car. We just partnered with a developer that's going to with a project called the Cul-de-sac, which is a carless community on light rail. And that's something that's really innovative. And we're setting the leading example on that type of development. And hopefully there's going to be more development like that in the future.
Mr. Woods.
So I absolutely support a fully multimodal transportation system. We're still having a lot of conversations in the community about bike lanes. And one of the things I want to do as mayor is really bring a thoughtful, comprehensive solution to this issue. There are more and more people that are choosing to ride bikes as their primary mode of transportation, not just simply for recreation. And we've had this arc, we're still having conversations about McClintock Road and all of the issues pertaining to the bike lane. And I think at some point we have to really take a bigger picture look and say, aren't we all tired of having the same conversation about this? Everyone in this community would agree that people should be able to ride their bikes without fear of being clipped by a car. They should be able to get from point A to point B in a safe place and get back home to their families. And I would like to find a way, maybe it's on major arterials, maybe on some sort of the side collector streets, we develop a more integrated system in that way. But I frankly think we've got to do more to do that and stop having this long-running debate, because frankly, there are solutions to be had. I also believe that one of the issues when it comes to a lot of the rail systems is you need to have an expansion of the streetcar project. Right now, it was actually, that line was built to be a starter line, and it was supposed to be additional federal funding to build other units. But unfortunately, the federal funding dried up. I think as soon as maybe there's a potentially a different administration, we should find a way to expand those lines. And also, frankly, looking at light rail, part of the problem with it is it just doesn't go everywhere. I think that's the biggest challenge that most people face. If you're not in Mesa or Tempe or Phoenix, you can't get all the way around the valley on the rail system. So we really have to encourage other city council members and mayors and state legislators that having a fully interconnected system where people can get from one part of the valley to the other on a train or through bus, that's the way to go, because we do have climate change issues to deal with. We have air quality issues. I have asthma and terrible allergies, so it's a personal issue to me. But I think we have to do a lot more to really fully build out the system so everyone who wants to use it has the ability to.
Right. I just want to add something to this. As a chair of MAG, which is Maricopa Association of Governments, we oversee all the master planning and transit for Maricopa County. And I've been working with my partners here in the East Valley, especially with Mayor Giles, on expanding the streetcar route when there is additional funding available. And I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that we do have federal funding, and making sure hopefully we get someone in the Oval Office that will help really contribute to the infrastructure for this country that we all need.
Thank you. And let us go back to our sponsors and the Arizona Republic, Paulina Pineda.
Thank you, Vic. Protesters have gathered at council meetings several times this year with calls for change, most frequently about police matters. What is your role in addressing those concerns?
And for this round, let's start with Mr. Woods.
Thank you. So I happen to watch those meetings on TV. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, was the situation was not handled exactly the way that it should have been. The council chambers are not many times the place where you can have a conversation such as that one. They're governed by too many rules and too many policies and too many procedures. What should have happened, it was like what happened in Phoenix when they had a similar situation. Mayor Gallego actually convened a community meeting where people were able to come without the constraints of being in council chambers. They were able to share their unfiltered views on what they think needed to be changed, and quite honestly, to get out emotions that were frankly very raw, and understandably so, given the tragedy of the situation. And so I think that that kind of thing needed to happen to take some of the pressure off of the actual council meeting, but you have to be willing to open it up and understand that people are going to come, the opinions are going to be a little bit raw, people are going to yell and scream, but frankly, that's their right. And I think we have to provide people with that kind of opportunity, and we should have during that situation. I also just think that it's very important that we have conversations moving forward about a lot of things, whether it's recruitment, retention, use of force policies, and things of that nature. And I think we have to have someone in office who does have the ability to lead some very tough conversations on some of these issues. Issues concerning race and policing and a whole bunch of things are frankly very challenging, charged issues to talk about. But I do believe unequivocally that I'm the right person to lead that kind of big conversation and take the city to a different place.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, and I was here for those protesters' meetings, and I thought it was so important to listen to the individuals and what they had to say, and we did that on multiple occasions. And even after the conversation was done, I also met with individuals privately to discuss some of the situations and some of their concerns and how we're going to move forward and build and bridge this community. And that's something that we actually have a plan in place. We're working with our police chief and also our community development office, our community services office, to have that dialogue. Right now, there is an investigation and a case pending, so there's not much we can say, but that does not mean that we're not working behind the scenes and making sure that our residents know that we are a caring, compassionate community, and we want to listen. And you saw that more than anything. We let people speak. They want to be heard, and we listen to them, and we will continue to listen to our residents. And I think that's the first sign of how we heal this community is when we listen to individuals and what they have to say so we can build a better Tempe for all of us.
Thank you. And to our co-sponsor of the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, Jihan Cottrell.
Thank you, Vic. 2 years ago, Tempe lost its beloved children's theater company, Child's Play. In your opinion, how can the Tempe Center for the Arts be better utilized?
And for this round, let's start with Mr. Mitchell.
Well, I mean, we're very grateful for the Child's Play Theater, and they still have some performances here in our community. And what's really I want to thank is our residents for supporting the Arts Initiative to really bring arts to our community and really expand one of our biggest and treasured assets, our Tempe Center for the Arts. And we have a great art director with Ralph Remington that we hired, who's a specialist, and we're really expanding the programming, so much so that we're really engaging arts in a park. We have an arts master plan that was vetted and worked with the residents of our community for what they would like to see, which is why we're seeing these programs expand. Tempe is known as an arts community, not just at Tempe Center for the Arts, but also you see arts in our streets, you see it in our bus stops, our transit, our public facilities. We actually require arts, some form of art, when we work with developers to have that sense of community pride in our community. And I think all that combined really attracts people that want to live here, businesses want to locate here, but more importantly, we're only going up and continuing to build the great program that we have at Tempe Center for the Arts, and we have some great volunteers that support with the Friends of the Arts, and it's exciting with the Arts Commission that we have, with the vision that they're leading, along with the council for the future art program that we have at the Center for the Arts.
Thank you. Mr. Woods.
So I think one of the things we need to do is change some of the booking. Many times I've heard people say that one of the challenges in booking the main theater is that it's too small. I think it's not really that it's too small, it's a matter of booking the right kinds of acts that are going to draw crowds to fill a theater of that size. And I think we should clearly be working with people who know that business and know how to draw the acts that will draw in Tempe's demographic and really fill that space up in a real way. I think the other really underutilized portion of that center is, of course, the bar area. I mean, there could be a really cool restaurant, wine bar right in that section that would be for people who don't want to be on mill for the time being and they want to enjoy a glass of wine or any kind of appetizer and look out onto the beautiful lake. But that facility, from a kitchen standpoint, has never really been built out in a way that you can utilize it that way. And it frankly needs to be. And if we need to spend a bit of money as a city to do some retrofitting to really add an amenity that would draw more people to that facility and actually put more eyes on the Tempe Center for the Arts, I think that's money well spent.
Thank you. Let us go back to the audience. Yes, sir.
Hi, my question relates to the climate crisis, and I appreciate your answers to the previous question relating to transportation and tying that in with the climate. Tempe passed a municipal carbon reduction and renewable energy policy. Council recently approved its first climate action plan. Mayor Mitchell voted for the Conference of Mayors resolution in favor of a national price on carbon emissions. Thank you for that. In spite of these important steps, meeting the goals of the action plan and the energy policy could have serious economic consequences for the city if it has to go it alone, not to mention failing to avert the climate crisis, meaning if there isn't a national solution. If elected, what will you do to support much-needed national solutions? For example, would you support a city resolution in support of the right national carbon fee and dividend legislation such as H.R. 763?
Thank you. And for this round, Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, I'll be honest with you. We value the relationships that we have in our community with the businesses to be more efficient and be more resourceful and resilient. Tempe is one of the most resilient communities. We signed on resilient communities workshops. I've been a part of that with Dr. Braden Kay, our sustainability manager, and we're going to continue to evolve and be innovative, so much so that we partner with our utility companies, and we just received an award regarding carbon neutral and helping us, especially with the fire station in South Tempe, to be more efficient with carbon emissions. And that, you can't do it by ourselves. We have to do it in partnership with the development community, with the business community, as well as the utilities companies. And we're very fortunate that SRP is located right here in Tempe, and they've been really receptive to us, especially in planting additional trees in our parks, which I can get into a lot. So it's really exciting about the innovative ideas that we have and the direction that we're heading. And we're the first city to be carbon neutral by 2035. And I think that's something that we don't take lightly. I mean, if you pull up to the library complex, we have some of the charging stations that you mentioned, and we need to continue to work federal legislation with our lobbyists and with our congressional delegation more than ever. So thank you for that question.
Mr. Woods.
So I think one of the key issues we have to focus on when it comes to sustainability is frankly development. There is so much development in this city that I think it's imperative that we end up working with developers to make sure they're including sustainable elements into their projects. I think that's one of the biggest ways to address the climate crisis, is to make sure when buildings are being built, we're talking to them about solar panels or rainwater harvesting or things that are truly going to make that development sustainable for the long run. When you've got someone building an affordable housing project, we should especially be having those conversations, given the fact that to keep the home has to be affordable not just in rent alone, but also in terms of utilities. And so I think those conversations really need to be had if we're going to create a truly sustainable Tempe. I also think we should have some kind of a program to retrofit existing buildings that already are in Tempe if they do want to add solar or other sustainable elements to those structures. I believe also talking about, tree canopies, same thing. We have parts of this city, frankly, that don't have any shade and therefore lack oxygen and that aren't even safe to be in during the summer months. So I think we have to create truly walkable pedestrian environments, and that frankly is by increasing the tree canopy in a realistic way. I also just will pivot really quickly too to talk about Tempe Beach Park, because that's something else I see. That's something that is a huge asset and could be a place that people could spend a lot of time in, but you really can't program the park right now for 12 months out of the year. You've really got to find a way to add increasing shade cover so people can sit along and look on the lake and spend time with their families in a real way. But the trees that you put out there and all throughout the city are not just going to help the people in that one specific area, they're going to help the entire community. So as I said before, this is a huge issue to me, and frankly, I'm supportive of anything we can do to thoughtfully and proactively address the climate crisis.
Thank you. And let's take another from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. No, I'm too short. Okay. So there's been a multi-unit structure approved on the southwest corner of Broadway, and it with a request of over 500 parking places and over 300 bike parking areas. That can easily mean, for the neighborhoods north of that across Broadway, 1,000 additional car trips a day, and even, and bicycles. I don't worry quite so much about that. But I just want to say that the neighborhoods north of this are single-family neighborhoods. There's large park. There are no sidewalks along a large part of Roosevelt. There are no crosswalks, no safe crosswalks, no marked crosswalks. It's an orbit route, so there's lots of people getting on and off. There are no handicap accessible areas on those sidewalks that do exist, except at 13th Street and Broadway. And the city has nothing in place to address the issues and what this means for the safety of the residents in that area and the high school students that get off and on and the kids who play in the Little League, et cetera. So my question is, how does a situation like this fit with Tempe's claim of a Vision Zero? And how does it fit with its claimed interest in neighborhoods, especially old established ones, and character areas?
Thank you. And let's start with Mr. Woods.
So thank you for the question. I do support the Vision Zero plan. I think it's very important, once again, as I talked about earlier, to make sure that everyone in the city, whether you're traveling by car or bike or any other mode of transportation, you can actually feel safe getting from point A to point B. I think that's critically important. I also think that we just have to, actually, the second part of your question, what was the second part? It was characters. Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest issues we have to worry about, and there's all this conversation right now about the Urban Core Master Plan, and it came up during the council forum, we have got to at some point really thoughtfully determine how many people we can realistically pack into the downtown area. Because the number of people you put there has real impact on the neighborhoods that directly surround downtown. And right now, I think sometimes what we're doing is we're looking at projects sort of on a one-off kind of basis and not looking at them from a 30,000-foot view and recognizing here's how many people we can realistically fit down here in terms of bodies and cars and really weighing the impacts. One of the things that I've looked at even when it comes to the current discussion about the Urban Core Master Plan, there's no real serious conversation in that document so far about traffic impacts. Given how much people in North Tempe and South Tempe talk about the issues pertaining to traffic, I find that the exact reason why that document is nowhere near ready for prime time. So we've really got to focus on, when you talk about, quality of life for neighborhoods, I think we have to look at things like that. We have to look at the amount of density we're putting downtown. We have to make sure that we're not putting so many people in that they're going to overwhelm our surrounding neighborhoods that have made Tempe the great place that it is. And I think it's important that whatever we do from a public policy standpoint, we are enhancing people's quality of life and not destroying it.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
And thank you for the question. And I believe for that particular project, they actually put less parking than what was normally required. And I do support Vision Zero, and that's something that I've been a part of, the working group. And I share your concerns, especially when it comes to the character of the neighborhood, because that project was the first project that's going to be part of the Broadway corridor. And then we have massive plans for the roads and the streets and the infrastructure that's part of our CIP budget for the next 5 years that's going to impact that area as well. And I think it's something that we take very seriously when it comes to a character of a neighborhood. And that project, I know we have less parking than what was initially intended for it. And then I will tell you that when it comes to the urban core, I know this is outside of the urban core. So I will tell you that the whole point of urban core is to get the public feedback. People are coming here, and we are planning for that reason, because we're expected to add an additional 40,000 people by 2050. So with that being said, or 2040, with that being said, that's what this plan is for. We may not, I have I voted against certain development projects because I thought it was too dense in our downtown area. And that's why even more, I really appreciate the urban core coming back. We're taking our time on it. We're getting the residents' feedback to make sure that we do have the proper types of buildings that can really, use and house certain types of people and vehicle traffic. And we are under study right now, a traffic study with Arizona State to a whole host of options, from getting people off the street level on University to looking at more innovative ways to move people in and around our downtown, which also brings into what we're happening down in the southern part of our city, even on the Broadway area with our orbit system. So there is a lot of opportunities that we're going to address those challenges.
Yes. Mr. Woods.
So one quick thing talking about the urban core, I've spent time with a lot of residents, in the North Tempe Neighborhood Association, and they've talked to me many times about there are areas north of the river and in their area that they would love to have redeveloped, where they would actually come out as residents and support new businesses, new industries, and new jobs, and new housing. But we're not having conversations with them about that, and we're not even trying to steer the developers who are coming in to those areas that are very much underbuilt and really in a lot of ways, kind of run down. And so I think that instead of trying to pack everyone into this one area of town, you've got other areas where the neighbors actually would welcome the development, and we should have some conversations with them. So therefore, you're not putting them all within a 2 or 3 block radius, but you're actually spreading it out all through Tempe, and therefore not creating the traffic impacts for one community. Talking to some folks over in the Wilson Art Garden District in Mitchell Park, because of all the new construction over there, they're seeing over 5,000 car trips a day down Farmer. That's a lot of cars. And so then we start talking about, 40,000 new people coming in and all these extra jobs. It's only going to get worse from a congestion standpoint. So we have to be much more proactive when developers come in. First of all, seeking out the right developers who want to build stuff that's actually within the right scale that this town can handle, but then also trying to steer them to other places where the development would frankly be a lot more welcome than just all within a 2-block radius.
And let us go back to the bill payers and our sponsors, the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Cottrell.
Thank you, Vic. Panhandling on Mill Avenue has been an increasing issue with downtown businesses in recent years. Homeless individuals frequently camp in Tempe parks, leaving waste and paraphernalia. In your opinion, what can be done about the homeless issue in Tempe?
And for this, let's start with Mr. Woods.
Thank you. So One of the big things we really have to focus on is, frankly, spending a little bit more money in this area to really achieve maximum result, but it's also spending it on programs and strategies that actually work. You know, many times I hear the city talking about we're now giving $1 million more when it comes to human services, or we spend a lot more than surrounding East Valley cities on human services and on homeless efforts. But does anyone think that those efforts are really making a huge difference? We all talk about it. Whether I'm in North Tempe or South Tempe or anywhere else, people talk about the permanent encampments in Papago Park. They talk about in North Tempe the fear of sending their kids to some of the neighborhood parks because of some of the activity, and a lot of the aggressive panhandling that goes on in downtown Mill. So my perspective is you can be humane and in line with Tempe values and do right by the men, women, and children who are suffering through this, but you can also aggressively deal with the problem. I think that creating more transitional housing opportunities is important. There are people who are ready to get off the street, but we don't have opportunities like that currently in the city for those folks. When I was on council, I spent some time working on a permanent supportive housing program, otherwise known as Housing First. We were the first city in Maricopa County to implement that program, and it's been so successful now that it's been replicated all throughout the county. But it was because I and another council member actually had the guts to frankly take that first step and really try something new and innovative. So I think the transitional housing thing is important. I think it's frankly right-sizing that budget to make sure, like if you say we spend $1 million more in human services, but if you really look at the population of the city, which is roughly around 185,000 people, it's actually like $5-6 a person. It's not that much money, and I think that's where statistics can frankly be deceiving. The human services budget in the city has not really much increased since 2003. And so if we're really going to find a way to address this problem, we shouldn't just sort of throw an arbitrary number like $1 million. We should actually really look at what it's going to take to bring some thoughtful, innovative solutions to the city and right-size the budget and make sure that we're actually supporting programs that are proven and that work and support our local nonprofits that do this work so exceptionally well.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. This is a really great question because I think we all know, and I see a lot of very familiar faces in this crowd, that Tempe is a very caring and compassionate community. So much so that we spend 32% more than any other city in the valley when it does come to human services. We have an award-winning agency review process through Tempe Community Council, which we help provide wraparound services and additional services for different agencies to affect those that are in need. In Tempe, we are really building a Tempe for everyone. And right now, with the additional $11.6 million that we've spent, we were able to house with CDBG funds over 3,000 individuals and families. With our HOPE team, we housed 246. We have a housing first strategy that we implemented that I was a part of. We also have a housing impact statement that we require developers to come in, what type of impact will your project have on our community, and we work with them to incentivize them to see if they can help add additional resources to our community land trust. And I was on the council when we first established the community land trust, and we partnered with Newtown. And it's important that we continue to work with other agencies and partner because this is a regional challenge. I worked with our city manager, especially as the chair of Maricopa Association of Government, which oversees human services for Maricopa County. We worked with the city of Phoenix and Mesa. We actually created a task force with our city managers and the mayors to really work at solutions and wraparound services. And we're able to do that, and we're going to continue to be innovative and creative. We have added 5 big projects that helped with housing. Everything from the Habitat for Humanity with the Parkview townhomes. We worked with the Tempe micro estates that we're working with the Community Land Trust. And we also we just had groundbreaking with Eastline Village on Apache with 56 units. We're never gonna be done. We're gonna continue to look for additional resources, work with partners in our community to have those wraparound services, and really have a housing first strategy, which we do have that we've adopted.
Mr. Woods, you have a response?
Yeah, so my central issue, though, is in that 32% number that the mayor cited, that that includes Section 8 housing vouchers. So while it might be technically human services, all 32% of that money is not going towards homelessness. So I think the number's a little bit misleading, honestly. But the other thing is, once again, I'm going to have to ask you, the statistics might mean one thing, but we can all see with our own very 2 eyes that we're not doing everything we could be doing, and that some of the approaches that we're using are not working. And so I think part of leadership is frankly stepping up and saying, some of these things are not working. We have to be willing to really challenge ourselves and do better. And it's not that we don't have great people at the city and we don't have great people at our local nonprofits, but I think we all have to come together and recognize which strategies work and which ones don't. Because if we're spending that much more money than surrounding communities, but we still have this huge challenge, how effective are those programs really? Are they really helping to get those men, women, and children off the streets and living productive lives? I would argue it's not, and frankly, we can do as Tempe a lot better.
I just want to point out that one of the things that we did do, we take great pride in, is this last year alone in our budget, we invested nearly $1.25 million. And in 2017 and 16-17, we increased over $266,000 more dollars into human services and homelessness challenges. And we're working with innovative ways to work with our partners from Tempe Community Action Agency to Tempe Community Council to iHelp. You know, we're not going to be done. We're never going to be done. We're going to continue to push and be innovative to help solve solutions for those that are in need.
Thank you. Let's go back to the audience for a question.
Okay, hi, I'm Amber Rivera. I'm a student at Arizona State University, and I know we touched on this a little bit, but I kind of want to bring it back about the policing issue. So this past year, we've definitely seen heightened tensions between law enforcement and the community, especially when we talk about marginalizing communities of color. So as mayor, how would you work to strengthen this relationship between the two while also encouraging de-escalation rather than quick impulse reactions?
Thank you. And let's start with Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you for the question. This is important. We have a what do you call it, a compassionate policing program. We work with our police chief and our police department because we are a very caring and compassionate community. I've also, even when Mr. Woods was on the council, we get along well, but we also work together on My Brother's Keeper. And right now I'm working with Councilmember Keating and I on My Brother's Keeper to work with a consultant and with our police department to engage our community for those that feel like that do not feel like they're getting a fair share, if you will. So it's important that we have that communication and that outreach, and that is happening. It will be happening very soon. So we're excited about what we're doing, and I think that as a caring and compassionate community, as mayor, that's something I can take a lead on, which I have been, and we're going to continue to listen to our residents.
Thank you. Mr. Woods.
So thanks for the question. I think that going back to an earlier answer I gave, we are going to have to look at things such as recruitment and retention and mental health and use of force policies and de-escalation techniques. And I think the big thing is, though, the great thing about Tempe is that we have a police chief and our union rep and our rank and file officers who are willing and ready to have that conversation. And we've got a lot of folks in the community who really do care, who also want to come to the table to have that discussion. But I think we have to have someone there, and I think I've got a unique ability to do this, to really lead a conversation on a whole bunch of very emotionally charged issues. And I think the first thing going back to it that I wanted to do was to have something that really is a community meeting. I'm telling you, council meetings are tough because many times you can't speak on topics that aren't agendized, you only get 3 minutes, and the only people who are really comfortable in that environment are the council members because we're used to it. So I think you have to create an environment where people feel like there's a level playing field and they can come in and really thoughtfully share their opinions. I think the only way we really bring everyone to the table and we find some solutions to these issues is by getting us all in the room and having an open, honest conversation. And I know we've got both people on both sides who are prepared to do that, and I'm prepared to lead that conversation.
Thank you. And let us go back to our sponsors and the Arizona Republic. Paulina.
Thank you. This is from an Arizona Republic AZ Central reader. Sometimes it feels that our mayor and city council concentrate on downtown Tempe and ASU, plus growing business adjacent to Light Rail Line. There is life south of the US 60. What are your plans for South Tempe?
And let's start with Mr. Mitchell.
Well, I live in South Tempe, and we really do focus down there. One of the initiatives that I pushed when on the council is we created some of the character areas. We have 8 character areas, and we wanted our residents to understand what would you like to have in terms of goods and services, and what would you like as a community, you know, identify certain areas of the city. And we made great investments. We partnered, especially when I've been mayor, we worked with the development at Discovery Business Campus, where we are home to State Farm. We also are home to Chase is moving 45, I mean, not State Farm. State Farm has a building there, but Northern Trust and also Shutterfly has a big production facility there as well as Chase is moving 4,500 employees into the southern part. And we're almost built out and working with Arizona State University with the research park. We have some great programs and business partners in South Tempe. And we're also even looking even further towards the west towards I-10. We're expanding the infrastructure. We've just resurfaced a lot of our streets that we're going to continue to do, as well as the medians and the right-of-ways. And we're working with small businesses to make sure that they're coming online. We're seeing a lot of good attraction with restaurants and partnering with some of the shopping center owners in the southern part of our city to really have that sense of character area that our residents desire and what they look for. So it's really exciting to see the transformation. And we've also invested in the Western Canal, additional bike paths. In my time as mayor, and it's exciting to see the people use the canal, and we're connecting it to other bike trails throughout our community. Thank you.
Mr. Woods.
So I think one of the things that people in South Tempe are looking for are lifestyle amenities. And I'll tell you a story. Before I left council, I led a working group with Councilmember Robert Arredondo Savage about strip center revitalization, trying to find ways to revitalize strip centers that at one point actually were configured in a way that people lived, but now with people's changing needs no longer fit those needs. And I didn't want to simply just try to fill vacant space at a center. I wanted to try to provide an environment where people could really get everything they want. Because the routine thing I hear from a lot of residents in South Tempe is they spend a ton of their money outside of the city, in Chandler and Scottsdale and Phoenix. So we are losing a lot of sales tax revenue that's going right over our borders because we're not doing a good enough job of providing the kinds of amenities they need. Until the whole corner at Rural and Warner came about with Tempe Public Market and Ghost Ranch and Cotton and Copper, that was a virtual restaurant food desert. There was practically nowhere to eat and nowhere to go. And one of the things I tried to do before I left council was really find a way to get residents in a room. I probably collected about 10 to 15 residents in South Tempe and really had them participate in a process where I didn't just simply talk at them, but they provided me input about what some of the assets were and what some of the deficits were, and we worked towards real solutions. So I think that's what they want. They want the ability to go to a nice restaurant, go to a wine bar, have arts and cultural opportunities right there in their area and not have to necessarily go to downtown or go near ASU. They want to have that stuff within walking distance or biking distance, and so I think it's imperative that we do that. The other thing I'll talk about, though, in terms of that, though, is I was also on council responsible for working on an adaptive reuse ordinance, which is a technical term for finding ways to reuse old buildings. That's part of the way that we ended up getting Tempe Public Market, which was an old Circle K, because originally that building was going to be torn down in favor of yet another Starbucks. So my perspective was we have got to find ways to change the code and streamline it so it's not cost effective for developers to simply just tear things down, but actually preserve some of Tempe's history and put present day uses in those buildings. And that whole center has been completely revitalized by that one restaurant, and now all of a sudden you've got a whole renaissance going on down there. So I think it's imperative upon us to work with and recruit people who are going to bring the kinds of amenities to that area that we want. The last thing I'm going to say really quickly is on the character area process. It's a wonderful notion, but the problem is the process doesn't have any teeth. In Phoenix, you have something called village planning committees, which actually do really go before council, and the residents have the ability to hold the council and the staff responsible for what happens and what doesn't. I have talked to countless residents who told me what the character is. I sat down and I told the city all these things, but nothing ever happens. That's because it's primarily a visioning document, but there's no way of truly enforcing it. I support a way of having a system like a village planning committee where actually things are enforceable and residents aren't just simply saying things that are never going to happen.
I really take pride in working with small businesses. My last State of the City was at Tempe Loves Local, and I was fortunate to work with Aaron Chamberlain with Tempe Public Market, and then I also fortunate to work with Ron Lynch with Booty Daddies to make sure that that happened in a small business restaurant in South Tempe. And it's important that we continue to work with small businesses throughout, whether it be Jeff over at Crepe Bar, we got word of mouth. There's so many small businesses that really fit the character of the southern part of our city that our residents really enjoy. And having those relationships and working with people and being open and receptive and talking. When I talk to Tempe residents in South Tempe, they're looking for quality of life amenities, and we're seeing that. especially with the investment in our park system, with the Tempe Sports Complex, with all the other businesses that are coming in and around. It's becoming more of a really destination area in the southern part of our city. So I really am excited about the direction we're heading, and even more so, working with small businesses to really take a foot with unique character businesses in the southern part of our city.
Thank you. And let us go to the audience. Sir, question? And we're bumping up against the clock, so if you can keep that brief and our candidates can keep their responses as brief as possible, that will help.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Arizona Republic because they just stole my first question. And that is that, you know, we really, as things grow in our city, and it has for years and years and years, fifth generation Tempean, I can say that I have seen tons of change within the last 15 years, and more so than I have ever seen anything happen in any given city. And this is in the Valley. And this is, quite frankly, frightening for the people that live within our communities because of all of the focus on the bubble of the downtown area and how we have to just grow and expand because it is all coming. More businesses are coming that are going to incorporate a whole lot of people that live within the city to work for these companies and whatnot. We have not looked at what is going to happen in the South Tempe area because, quite frankly, a lot of you live there and aren't really used to having to deal with the downtown area. And that's pretty much what I have to ask both candidates.
You got the, what's the question? Real briefly.
What are you going to do with regard to the height and the density of the outside, like in the South Tempe area?
And let's start with Mr. Woods.
Thank you for the question. So, I mean, I do support, you know, the general plan that voters vote on every 10 years that determines what kind of density is actually appropriate in areas. I was also part of a council that talked about how to get a general plan amendment, you can't just get a simple majority, but you have to actually have 5 out of 7 people think that it's a good idea. And I think that what we should really do as council members is make sure that we hold people to the general plan and to the existing zoning that the residents stipulated through their popular vote that they want. I think the only time that you really should be able to override that is not just even getting a 5 out of 7 vote, but speaking with the residents who are going to be directly impacted by this proposed development and finding out if this thing is really compatible with their quality of life, and also if that person, you know, determines they're going to be a responsible community steward and contribute something to Tempe, as opposed to just simply building something and flipping it and making their money and taking off. So I tend to think that it's about, you know, honoring that document, honoring what our residents have told us they want in terms of a vision. And also, I talked about this earlier too, I think it's imperative that we don't just simply sit back and let developers come here, but we also, frankly, seek out people who we know are responsible builders and will build things that actually fit the character of this city and fit the scale of what we're trying to do. If we simply sit back and just completely let whatever happen, well, we're going to keep getting speculators who want to come in and build 40-story towers. I think if we talk to people who are more local and they are actually emotionally invested in the area, they will build stuff that actually is compatible with the city, and we're not going to continue to see some of the neighborhood angst, which is understandably so. And that's something that I pledge to work on if elected mayor.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, I really do support our General Plan 2040 and what our residents vote on. And density in urban has its place. That's why the urban core is where it is, and the southern part of the city is not going to have urban. Doesn't mean that it may not happen in the future, but that's for the voters to decide. But I think it's important that as mayor, and I'm going to continue as mayor, to lead on proactively attracting businesses to our city, and all throughout the entire city, not just north, not just south, not just central. It's for the entire city that we really do need to have a vision, because we are landlocked. And there's an old saying, if you don't grow, you die. We are constantly redevelopment projects, but it has to be consistent to the character of the area as well as to the general plan. And it's so important that we follow that. And I think we have been doing that, and we're working hard for future generations. Growing up here, It's so important to know where you've been in order to know where you're going to head. You talked about being the fifth generation. You have me beat. But I would tell you, you've seen a lot of change like I have. But a lot of the stuff is repeating but coming back in a different form.
Just a quick rebuttal. I definitely understand the notion of being pro-growth or pro-economic development, but I think what residents are asking us to do is to effectively manage the growth. And I think that's what their concern is, that they're seeing all these things getting built, they're seeing increasing traffic congestion and encroachment in their neighborhoods, and the city isn't doing an adequate job of protecting our neighborhoods. And I think that is the central challenge. I look many times, too, at how we even just manage construction projects. You've got, ASU building stuff, you've got the city doing their own stuff, you have the private sector doing their own thing. And how many people, even just by show of hands in the room, have found themselves leaving the downtown at a certain point in time, and every direction you turn, there's some kind of traffic obstruction? It happens all the time. We all experience that probably 5 out of 7 days a week. And so my perspective is we've got to find a way to encourage sort of progressive thinking and growth and responsible economic development, but we also have to be on top of managing it so we once again enhance the quality of our neighborhoods and not destroy their quality of life in the process.
Quick rebuttal. We just have a success story where there was a business that was trying to go in the southeast corner of Warner and McClintock. It wasn't a good fit, and we listened to the residents, and we denied it. And there's a couple other instances down there where we also denied some of the business just because the developer wanted to go there. It wasn't the right type of project for that area. And this council, and I would do as elected as mayor and continue to be mayor, I'm going to continue to listen to our residents and really work on what's best for our community.
All right, believe it or not, time has gone by rather quickly. So we're back to a timed response. We'll give each of you an opportunity to give your closing remarks, and we'll go in reverse order from the start. So, Mr. Woods, in 1 minute.
Well, once again, thank you, Vic. Thank you to the Arizona Republic and the Tempe Chamber of Commerce for hosting this, and thank you for all of you who are here and those folks watching at home. I told you I moved to Tempe nearly 17 years ago, and I love this city, and that's why I'm seeking to be the next mayor. For many of you, you saw my intro video when I first launched my campaign for council. And it was actually all about the relationship I had with my mother, who unfortunately passed away 8 years ago. And some people questioned that and asked me, well, this doesn't really have anything to do with public policy. But what I was attempting to do was not talk about policy at that moment, but give you a sense as to where my values personally come from. My parents steeped us in the notion of civic engagement and giving back to the community. I did not get into politics or public service for the purpose of going to ceremonies or for the purpose of being a celebrity. I got into it for 2 reasons. I care about responsible public policy, and I deeply care about this city and its residents. So with that, I'm asking for your vote on March 10th, and just appreciate your time tonight, and thank you so much for listening.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you to the Arizona Republic and to the Tempe Chamber of Commerce for hosting, and thank you for those watching and those here today with us here at the Tempe History Museum. It is an honor to be the mayor of Tempe, and I'm very proud of what we have accomplished since I've been mayor, investing in a quality of life, investing in our parks, in our neighborhoods. I often say the cornerstone of our community are our neighborhoods, and the cornerstone of our neighborhoods are our parks. And it's so important that we continue to invest in our neighborhood and our community. And I'm very proud of what we've accomplished, from anti-discrimination to equal pay, and to be in a city, Tempe, for a city for everyone in our community, and we're open and receptive to new ideas. I would tell you, the only promise I can make as a mayor, and I will continue to do so in life in general, is that I will be honest with my dealings with the city of Tempe. I will listen, and I will make sure that I'll be open and receptive to new ideas. I ask for your vote for Mark Mitchell for mayor on or before March 10th. Thank you so much.
Well, that concludes our 2020 Tempe Mayoral Candidate Forum, co-sponsored by the Arizona Republic and the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. Again, our thanks to the candidates for their willingness to endure close scrutiny. We applaud their commitment to being involved in making Tempe a better community. You can best reward their efforts by casting a vote for the candidate of your choice. And I would make a side observation that I think some of our candidates and leaders on the national stage could take a lesson from the civility of our candidates for both mayor and city council in the city of Tempe. Special recognition to the forum sponsors and their representatives, Paulina Pineda from the Arizona Republic and Jihan Cottrell, Chair of the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. Sue Janke, standing over there in the corner, is Chamber Vice President of Marketing and Programming, and she helped coordinate things on the floor. And she didn't do a lot in this session, but Erica Acorn has been our timer, and go ahead. I know you want to do that. All right, thank you. And to Ann Gill, President and CEO of the Chamber. Our thanks to you for your stimulating and provocative questions. Hopefully you found the dialogue valuable and received responses that will aid in making a more informed and sound decision when you cast your vote. And I also want to thank the Tempe History Museum for allowing us to host this here. If you haven't been to the museum before, we invite you to and encourage you to visit the gallery. So that pretty well wraps up the affair with today's swirl of national politics, census, and sometimes seemingly more distracting newsmaking events. It's easy for many to think that a local election is unimportant, but be assured it is at this level that decisions have the most direct impact on our lives. So keep in mind as voters that we do have the greatest amount of control and exercise the highest influence on government here at the local level. And that's why your vote should never be dismissed as immaterial. All candidates readily acknowledge that each and every vote counts. Remember that Election Day is March 10th, and we hope that this election will prove to be the best voter turnout ever in Tempe history, and that's up to you and your friends and your family. So until then, the Tempe History Museum, we thank them again. Our best wishes for a wonderful holiday and a very productive new year. Good night.